budget hearing we do in advance, publicly noticed, and immediately upon the conclusion of the hearing, we will go to the regular meeting. So for the board, not a lot new here. So I'm going to go rather quickly. We kind of started out going back through the process. Non-instructional, Carrie did, Matt did instructional. Then we talked about the financials, the state aid and all that stuff. Then I kind of did the summary with recommendations. We had a week after that where we kind of had some discussion. We've had this presentation now kind of from big, which looked back at last year, to kind of medium, which is what you saw last time. I'll call this one small. All right, so there's nothing new, nothing too exciting, very little new, I should say. So again, starting our hearing off with our goals and our mission statement. We do try to make sure that is the focus. We've talked about our 3 goals, the last one being the newest, the digitally fluent one, and the first 2 have been our goals since I've been here in this role. We've emphasized these guiding principles. Again, we've had these since I started, really trying to match our academic program and our budget, using data to drive our resources, which we know are very limited. The use of data, which we take great pride in. Again, that was goal number 3 at one point, but we really feel like we've institutionalized that across the board. And then where possible, reducing staff through attrition. That's to address our declining enrollment. Our budget pressures on the expense side. We have an employee wage increase. We know that we have contractual increases that we're obligated to pay, and of course those go up. Legal costs, the district is budgeting a little more this year for some legal issues that are out there to make sure they're prepared appropriately. Questar increases, Carrie kind of detailed those in terms of the capital budget, the administrative budget, just costs that essentially have been pushed down to us from Questar as their increases have, or their budget has gone up, that gets passed down. Utilities, materials, I think we all know that. There's the gas and the oil and all the stuff that we're seeing in our own homes, inflation type expenses as well. And then the employee benefits, which we'll go into right here. TRS is our teacher retirement system. The percentage rate went up about half a point. In real dollars, a little over 200,000. Totally out of our control. Again, that comes from the state to us. They try to keep it as flat as possible for budgeting purposes, but any little uptick is real money, as you can see. Our health insurance, we talked about how last year that said very little or very small increases. Unfortunately, we can't say that this year. Our increases are substantial. Budgetary impact of about $350,000, giving us about $500,000 in that slide right there. That's an expensive slide. On the revenue side, I'm calling it a budget pressure because you're probably seeing and hearing a lot about foundation aid increases and state aid increases. We are one of the very few districts in the state where we are not getting that foundation aid increase based on the formula that is in use at the state. We are actually overfunded. So we're the group that wants them to hold us harmless or keep our state aid flat. The state has been, I'll call it generous in quotes, in saying that we will not only hold you harmless, but a 3% increase. So if that was 0, we'd be in a lot of trouble, right? So the 3% increase will actually take in this case, because again, we are not ones that are getting a lot of money based on the correction to the formula. There's our state aid numbers. If you go all the way to the right, our year-to-year foundation aid is $512,000. That is 3%. So there's that number that I just mentioned. Our building aid, Carrie detailed in the past. It's very kind of inflated, sort of the exception to the rule, and that is really largely based on the flood. Remember, we spent about $2.1 million out of pocket, and then we got that aid back. So about 900,000 of that 966 is directly related to aid we're getting back due to the flood. So that number is much higher than we're used to seeing. All told, the bottom right corner, 1.3 million in additional aid. It's really 512,000 when you kind of boil it down, because the foundation aid is the number that matters. Tax cap, for us, we settled at 2.95. We are going to the cap. It's a revenue increase of close to $1 million. This is since the cap started, we've been at or below the cap. Last year we were below. So we're maintaining that, if not piercing the cap, but staying at or below, most of the time at. There's the impact of the 2.95 on full value assessments. Those are the increases. So someone with a $100,000 house would see an increase of about $55, 200,000, 109. So you can kind of read that through. But that again is the increase in the amount of your taxes. 1% of the levy, about $328,000. So you have an idea of what that means in terms of the revenue. Our budget summary, just so you have the numbers. You see our expenditures on the top line, our revenue, a little bit of a difference there. Really, I think the main factor here that we pointed out was the second to last row, the planned use of reserves. You see a reserve increase of $100,000. And we talked about how that is like when you are in your own home and you go to your savings account to pay for your regular expenses. So essentially what we're doing is dipping into our fund balance, an extra $100,000 we have in the past to help cover some of that gap. Budget to budget, our increase is $2.4 million. That's a 3.93% increase, larger than normal for us, but that's what this budget to budget increase is, due to those factors I mentioned before, really on the revenues, or excuse me, on the expense side. We looked at 4 options to address this. The first one was reductions. We are planning to reduce 4 aides. Really important to emphasize that those are IEP-driven reductions. It's really, by and large, we have a 15-1-1 program that's going away, and there's 3 aides tied to that. So when we talk about reducing aides, it's really need-driven, right? We don't have a need for them. So obviously, in our mind, it'd be financially irresponsible to just keep people on the payroll who we don't have a use for. In terms of the attrition, there's the 3 spots that we see that are going to go away, going back to that budget principle of reducing through attrition when possible. Middle school TA, middle school AIS teacher, and 1 intervention specialist, previously referred to as the academic coaches over the years. We had 3, down to 2, down to 1, we'll be down to 0. No layoffs there, but those are people who are retiring or have taken other assignments. 2 ways to replace. 1 is through the stimulus. Those are the 3 positions that we're going to look to fund through the stimulus money. An AIS position at the elementary school, and then 2 spots at the middle school, 1 social studies, 1 PE. At one point, we talked about cutting some of those positions, but because of the stimulus money, it'd be kind of silly to do that. The stimulus money is use it or lose it. So we project probably having to make some changes next year. That'll be in the reduction category, but we might as well use the money while we can. Those are things that are currently in our schedule. So when we talk about our programmatic options, it makes sense to keep them because they're offering value in our current system, which we feel is working well. The one of 2 is just to make it a little clear. We have 2 middle school retirements in PE. So 1 of the spots will be stimulus. The general fund, or in other words, positions that we're just going to bring in to the budget, are those 5 right there. Classroom teacher, high school English, a library position, and then PE, 1 at the elementary, and 1 at the middle school, the second 1 of 2. We do have some small additions. 1 is adding an assistant director of special education. That's going to be funded through stimulus money. We have a plan there that would essentially enable that to be a very small increase, as the person would be adding to the administrative unit, but it won't be like hiring a full-time administrator. There'll be some changes internally where we'll probably be able to take that on for a much smaller cost than a full FTE. 1 custodial worker, Carrie detailed that for you in terms of the space that our custodians are currently cleaning, way above the suggested industry standard, and something that we've been looking to do for years. If you go back to the bad old days, that department was cut pretty bad, and we've never replenished. So we know we're in desperate need there. The head mechanic is just a differential. We have a mechanic on staff. It'll be a little bit of an extra salary to move that person from a mechanic to a head mechanic and fulfill a role there that's been vacant. And then using the 7th period strategy, which we've used in the high school before, just to add some options for our students, most likely before school. We have a $100,000 capital outlay project in the budget again. We've done this last few years. Picture there is the high school weight room, which was done through this type of money. The important thing there is once you build it in, which we kind of bit the bullet on that a few years ago, to get it in, you get the aid on those the next year. So really important, because like in the capital project, that aid is over time. This aid on the $100,000 project is the next year. So You do a project, you get the aid the next year. You do the project that year, you get that aid. So now you're kind of paying it forward. So that gap is much, much, much less. What we've targeted this year is the 12-1-1 room, really rooms are kind of connected adjoining rooms in the high school. Some space for our special ed students that we believe are subpar. They need to be touched up, they need to be fixed, they need to be renovated, and they need a lot of work to them. If we're under 100,000, then we would look to add some fencing down the first and third base lines for baseball and softball, and that would be to keep balls that are in play from going into the crowd. If you've been to our games, we have people who sit along those sidelines, so it's a safety issue as balls, either batted balls or overthrown balls are going in. You have kids walking around, parents sitting, people on phones, you have balls flying all over the place. So in order to do that, you can do work outside of the building if you do $10,000 or more work inside. Obviously, the 12-1-1 rooms would be more than 10,000. So if it's if we have some room under the 100,000, that's what we would put it towards, is some fencing. The Equestria STEM High School we've talked about here a couple times, I believe. This is a programmatic option that Equestria offered for this current year. We did not buy into the service. They did it kind of late in the year. We looked at it, reviewed it. We've now removed that from the budget. So that was going to be for 2 spots. You see the value there, or the cost there, excuse me. At this point, we've taken that out of the budgetary plan, and we've notified Equestria of that. The 3-year plan, we'll kind of sail through these real quick. These are the reduction attrition slides. So if you look at the first 3 lines, those are all attrition. Once they go away, they'll just not be in the budget for the next 2 years. The 2 stimulus positions will be reduced next year, and then not in the budget following. And of course, the aides will be out and then not back in. So again, with these slides, we just wanted to give the board an idea of what was ahead. We hear the term both internally in April Park and in the paper and wherever else you're paying attention to, the fiscal cliff. School districts are very, very worried about the fiscal cliff. So we wanted to give you an idea of what that meant for us. In terms of the replacement positions, those 5 that we said we were going to replace, really easy slide, they're just going to stay in the budget, right? We need a librarian at the high school. We have to figure out a way to fund that, right? The English department was cut last year. We believe that that's at a spot now where we can't reduce it any further, or else we'll be impacting programs. So we're going to fund that. So I can kind of go through all those, but those are essentially just keeping them in the budget and in the general fund. The real hurt for us is in the AIS world. So we did a 4-year look. So you had last year, this year, the next 2. If you skip to that end slide, you'll see that we're going to be reducing our AIS, our academic intervention service providers, both at the elementary and the middle school. That is not being reduced because we think we don't need them. It's not being reduced because we think their services are not valuable. It's being reduced because we don't know how to pay for it. The bad news is that they're being reduced. If you're looking for some good news, I put that note in there. In March of 2021, when we went through this budget process, we're actually going to have to make these cuts. So we consciously use the federal stimulus money to reinstate those positions, as we talked through this process last year, put them back in the budget, knowing they were short-term. People that were hired in those positions were notified of that. There's a lot of domino effects. We had some internal transfers. It wasn't necessarily the people in the AIS positions. They will go back to where they were before. But the bottom line is, in 23, 24, it's going to look, as we project it, a lot like it would have looked when we started to build the budget for this current year. Doesn't make it easier or better. We're doing these presentations for the elementary, middle, high school, and transportation and O&M folks. I had one elementary one already. And this slide obviously is a big one because the elementary folks know for sure that these spots are needed. We know that our kids have these needs. We just, at this point, can't afford to have them in the general fund. The ones that we're looking to bring in, we're looking to kind of ease them in and then get them into the general fund going forward. So these are little stipend positions, stimulus money for the first one, they'll be bringing the general fund and then maintain. The plan to reduce this year for this year's budget for next year, 22-23, the reduction is the attrition, and we've talked to you about we're adding a 612 program. That is being done for 2 reasons, quite honestly. Those are some of our most needy students, and they're at the younger edge of the spectrum. We feel like it's the best thing for students, for them to be internal with us. We know at this age, if we kind of farm them out to a program, it's in some ways kind of a one-way ticket. We want to avoid that. We want to make sure we're doing the best we can for them here internally. So there's a student interest there, and there's also a financial interest. To not have that program would cost us $300,000 because we'd have to service those kids outside of the district, and they'd be sent to Equestria programs. We have approximately, and this is always very fluid, 3 kids right now, and the programs that they would require are about $100,000. So if we were to send them out of district, we're looking at a $300,000 hole in the budget, in addition to what we've presented. So clearly financial reason to do it, and clearly we think a reason to do it from a student point of view. The following year, we're looking at the reductions, which we just talked about. Really a significant decrease of stimulus funds is the reason there. We'll keep doing the attrition thing where possible, but with the caveat that it keeps getting tougher, right? We've been doing this now for 5 years. You start to have less and less positions that you can reduce through attrition, right? An example like is the elementary position that we're replacing this year. Our class sizes don't dictate us having the option of reducing an elementary teacher, for example, or the high school English teacher. We don't programmatically have the ability, without really impacting electives, to reduce the English department, right? So you can always do attrition, you can always reduce that way, but you're really getting into the academic program, and we're trying to avoid that. And the last bullet is about the use of fund balance, where we talked about an analogy. Just like we said, if you were, in a hypothetical example, if you were to make $50,000, but you were spending $60,000, and you had to go into your savings to pay for the extra $10,000, well, in the following year, if your expenses went from 60 to say 70,000 because of whatever reason, inflation and some of the stuff we just talked about, but you're still making 50, you now have to go into your savings to get the 10,000 from the previous year and 10 more thousand. That's what that increased use of fund balance is putting us in a position for. So we don't like to do that because we know that we're creating a gap that we have to figure out how we're going to close at some point. And then the following year, it's the same stuff. The stimulus funds will actually end though, right? We know they are coming to a close at 24-25, again, attrition, and then again, that fund balance. So we have to keep looking at ways to reduce and tighten the belt even more. This was our summary slide to kind of give you the 3-year projection through reduction and addition at the general fund. Nothing new in here in terms of previous presentations, and nothing new in here in terms of previous slides. Just a chart to sum it up in a way that may be helpful or self-explanatory now at this point, hopefully. We do have, as part of the budget, the vehicle replacement proposition. You can see what we're looking to do there with the 65 passenger buses and the 29 passenger buses and trade-ins. Cost there about $745,000. We have an O&M vehicle bringing us to a little over $800,000. This is something that the district has really emphasized over the years to get us on a very sustainable vehicle replacement program. Something I know that was near and dear to Michael's heart in terms of getting on that. It took the district years to build up to that, so that buses come off, buses come on, buses come off, buses come on. And we are at that point now due to some good fiscal management in the past. So it's very important in our mind to maintain that. Total cost, again, not to exceed $809,373. Important to remember that we receive aid close to 75 cents on the dollar from the state on those bus purchases. So those are all aidable, all transportation expenses. And because we want to show you that we are really being frugal and doing what is best, you can see there the average mileage of our buses. So again, we have about 100 square miles in the district, and our buses travel a good amount of distance, but they also, as you may know, don't always drive in the best of conditions due to the weather here. So buses in the Northeast, especially in our district, take a beating. So it's important to keep them updated. And then finally, our Board of Education election, we have 3 open seats. Those are 3-year terms. The candidates there are listed as they appear on the ballot. We had our Meet the Candidates night already, so we are prepared from a district point of view for the actual election. The vote itself, a week from tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., and as always, will be in the high school auxiliary gym. And that concludes this year's budget hearing. Any questions from the board?
How do you get absentee ballots?
How do you get absentee ballots? You ask Carrie. How do you get absentee ballots, Carrie?
So if you want to request an absentee ballot, you have to reach out to Yvonne Phillips in the business office. She will send you an application that you have to fill out to return to get your absentee ballot. If you need your absentee ballot by mail, you need to contact her by tomorrow. If you can pick it up or hand it back in person, it can be as of Monday. So if you're looking for them for mail, please reach out to her tomorrow so you can get an application in. Thank you. Go ahead.
I don't know why I didn't ask this before, or maybe I did and I forgot the answer, so I apologize. On the, it was under one of the reduction screens. You talked about the 612 program and bringing it into our district. And you have the 300,000 because you said it cost the district 100,000. Is that a net savings? Because we're gonna have staff to staff these rooms, obviously. Is that a net savings or is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. The cost to send them out would be about 300,000. We're going to be able to handle that internally with staffing again as we reassign people. We're doing some of the stuff with our SEL coaches. We'll become providing some of the support in that room, and it'll be done with staff that's currently in place. The special ed department is always very fluid because kids' IEPs change, kids age out, all that type of stuff. So we're always projecting in advance. So that'll be handled by current staff. Am I correct, Matt and Carrie? Or misspeak?
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment as it relates to the state aid that we receive and the lunacy that we are in some way overfunded. I just want to reference that the State Department of Education actually held a webinar that Daphne Jordan attended, and she shared that webinar on social media, and they actually acknowledged, and I can't even believe they can sleep at night, they acknowledged that the aid that they were giving any district was not even enough to cover the cost of inflation. So that's the uphill climb that we're facing in terms of the supposed overfunding status, and I really just wanted to make sure that the public was aware of that, because they really should be reaching out to the Department of Education and the elected officials at the state level to properly fund our districts.
Yes. Two things, and I don't want to hold stuff up too much. Carrie, this for you, just obviously again, not tonight, but going forward, I think what might be good for us to get is those mechanisms. I don't like spending down my savings a lot. I really don't. So whatever mechanisms might be besides attrition, we don't want to cut into program. Learning what other ways there might be to start putting that back. How much do we put it back on? If we add 20,000 at a time or 100,000, is it, what are the mechanisms and what is the manner in which you sort of start attacking that? Assuming that you've already started attacking it in your own mind or somewhere, but I think getting that kind of, once we get through this, sort of getting a sense of how you start to build that back up, when, if, would be helpful for me as a board member. And my other question, Jim or Matt, I can't do the math right now when my kids are going to be out of the elementary school, but the AIS staff, will they have, if they need the AIS specialists as a resource, if they sort of have a situation that comes up where it's like, I need somebody with more expertise than me, will the folks at the middle school and the high school be available as a resource for those elementary school AIS staff?
Yeah, for the students, is what you're asking?
Well, we have, when we say that there's 6 AIS positions, throughout the elementary school.
Yep.
Right? But not an intervention specialist.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So one thing I'm good at is knowing what I don't know and saying, okay, I need to talk to somebody with more expertise than me about this.
Yep.
And so will they have, I get that the intervention specialists at the high school have their own
So, yeah, there
Over there, but-
there aren't any intervention specialists left after this year, so that internal expertise is gone. However, we've done a lot of professional development with our K-5 teachers over the last 2 years. We brought in a group called the Reading League that have really expanded our knowledge base amongst our classroom teachers. Not in preparation of losing, I certainly did not want to see that position go, but understanding that in absence of that, at least we have more internal knowledge than we did prior to that. A lot of what the intervention specialist does is really reinforcing the knowledge that we've gained from those workshops, and a little more boots on the ground, pushing in the classroom, supporting. So we're gonna have to, pick up those pieces a little bit, but that's really an elementary focus for that position.
I wanted to comment about the bus proposition. Having sat through a few of these presentations, the main factor with bus replacement is not necessarily the mileage, it's the corrosion on the bodies, which ultimately is going to limit the replacement value or the trade-in value.
Thank you. Any comments from the public? All right, Jesse, I'll turn it back over to you for the start of the regular meeting.
That's the public's, it's not the same rules as public comment during, right? If somebody wants to say something, they can.
This is a budget hearing,
Yeah.
so the public is welcome to ask questions. Absolutely.
Just
It's
want
not
to
a
clarify
formal,
that.
this part of the, is not the board meeting.
If so, if you want to sing out, sing out. Sorry. That, I got that from my nurses.
All right, back to you for the beginning of the regular
All
meeting.
right.
Thank you.